Stuka Joe here for yet another infamous unboxing video, because unboxing videos are, yes, the beauty pageants of war games. And today we're going to show an unboxing video of the annual 2015 for Against the Odds magazine. Yes, the annual for 2015. It's not a typo. It came out this week. And we're in August 2017. Well, look at it this way, folks. Sometimes good things take some time. And this is a package that brings 4 games with a common theme, which is the fall of France, the German campaign in the West in 1940. And the cover shows a photograph of Hitler strolling in front of the Eiffel Tower with his generals after France fell. The back shows an equally infamous photograph of how some Frenchmen reacted when they saw the Germans marching through Paris. This is the back of the box. It brings 4 games. The designers of each of these games are John Prados, Michael Rinella, Stephen Cunliffe, Roger Nord. And there's a 5th game, which is one of those postcard games. And this game is about the fall of Fort Eben-Emael, the Belgian fort, and this game is designed by Paul Rohrbaugh. So I'll show you that too. The package brings 2 back-printed maps, so in total it's 4 maps, 22 by 17 inches, over 300 counters, 24 cards, 2 player aid cards, 4 rule books, 6 dice, and the pocket battle game that I just referred to. So I've already cheated, folks. I've already ripped the shrink wrap. I took a look. I've read some of the rules, and I know what's inside. So what I'm going to do, instead of opening the box and showing you what's in the box right now, which pertains to 4 games, which is going to confuse the hell out of everybody, I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to show you the components of each of the games separately, so it makes more sense, and you judge if you like what you see in the annual for 2015 of Against the Odds magazine. And the first game we're going to show you is Springtime for Hitler, designed by Michael Rinella. And you know that Michael Rinella is well known for his area impulse games, and this is one of them. And you see the map is an area map, and all maps in this package are by Mark Mahaffey. And you see that the areas are color-coded. There's circles there that tell you what's the modifier that is added to the defenders in the space, and the small number is the space ID. So it's your typical area impulse map. It has areas in the main map, and then there's off-map zones that are connected to these areas. Now, this particular game is a 2-player game. One side controls the Germans, the other side the Allies. And you have here some boxes that aid the players in playing the game. You have here the victory conditions, another box with the sequence of play, and you see there's a political, maneuvers, refit, and end phases. You have a summary. There's 2 types of impulses: movement, attack, and regroup or redeploy. And you have a reference here to how to compute the attack value as well as the defense value. And you know, in these games, each player rolls dice, and you compare the attack value to the defense value, and the difference is going to be the amount of loss factors that you have to remove from the losing side. Here you have place-to-place air support markers and the game turn track, 7 turns. Also an impulse track to record the impulses during each turn. Here we see the counters. These are the counters for the Germans. The counters in this game are 5/8 of an inch. The thickness is good. And you see that the Germans are organized by armies. And you see Dahlmann's 7th Army. And you see they are color-coded. His army is red, and there's a C, meaning that it belongs to Army Group C. You see the other armies and the commanders listed there. You see in the bottom row the Panzer Corps. During the French campaign, von Kleist commanded what is a Panzer Army, And these are the Panzer Corps that comprise the army. You have the Luftwaffe units, and there's, yes, oddly enough, there's an Italian army that may show up during the game. Here we see the French units in blue. Again, you see the commanders of each of the armies, the army group to which each of the units belong. You see that the first and second armies belong to Army Group 1. And you have the commanders there of each of the armies. We have markers to keep track of French morale. Here we have the British Expeditionary Force and Lord Gort and the Royal Air Force. And we have the French Air Force too. And in the case of the French, we have French armored divisions. And you see there de Gaulle's armored division. In addition, this game has some event markers, which you can see here. And below that, we see control markers and out of supply markers. Now we see the forces of Belgium and the Netherlands, each of their armies, and more control markers. Here we see the backs of the counters, and as much as the units are concerned, you see that they are reduced values. And we see the same here on the Allied side. And that is denoted by the stripe that goes across the counters. You see here more events, but these events pertain to the Allies, and those are printed on the back of the events that pertain to the Germans. We see the rule book for Springtime for Hitler. It is not very long. I believe it has 8 pages. It is in color. See here the explanations for the units and the markers. As any area impulse game, it has rules for impulses and types of movements and movement costs, the advantage, and you have some optional rules. And there's one scenario, which is the Plan Red scenario. And here we are at page 8. There's a glossary index, 8 pages of rules. And that is the first game of the package, Springtime for Hitler. And this game also includes a player aid card. And as you've seen here, the rules and the player aid cards are in paper format, the same paper used by the magazine. So I pulled this out, and you see that it has a sequence of play, and it has a description of the event chits. And finally, at the bottom, we see the cost table in resource points, what you can do by spending resource points. The next game is Betrayal by Roger Nord. And here you're seeing the map. It's also an area map. You see here on the right-hand side, we see the German forces where they are deployed here in these zones with numbers. This game is interesting in as much as it is a 2-player game, but one player controls the French forces and the other controls the British, Dutch, and Belgian forces. So who controls the Germans? The players alternate controlling the Germans. So it's a game that emphasizes in the cooperation or lack thereof between the Allies. So you're going to control the Germans every other time, and you're going to throw them against your rival here, which is the other Allied side. Now, interesting enough, there's a table that indicates where the German units can operate. So the player that is going to control the Germans will roll dice here, will cross-reference a result. All means that he can move units and use one tactic in all areas. That means France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Here, if he rolls this result, N1, he has one tactic that he can use in the Netherlands, and B means Belgium. So you see that most of the results are all, and the higher results are in the rightmost columns. Now, we see the tactics chart here, and after rolling to see where the units can move, the player controlling the Germans rolls for tactics. And this tells the player what he can do with the units. You can hold, refit, advance/attack, advance/attack/saturation bombing, and advance/attack exploit. So there's limitations on what you can do with the Germans depending on what you roll on both of these tables. Now the rules for Betrayal come organized in a booklet which shares also the rules for this other game, which is Strange Victory. So the first 6 pages of the rules, when you open the book from this perspective, are the rules for Betrayal. See, you get to page 6, and that's the end of the Betrayal rules, and you see that the print is upside down here. That's no mistake. I thought it was a mistake at the beginning, but it's really the rules for Strange Victory, which are printed in that perspective. So it's a clever way of saving paper. And you see here, it shows you what the numbers on the units mean. Attack, defense, movement, that's pretty standard. You have air units. And the back side is the reduced side, shown by that red bar. You see here that there is in the sequence of play what is called an automata German turn. Here is where one of the players controls the Germans with the restrictions that we talk about. They have to roll on the table. And then you have a movement phase with the Germans, a combat phase, and then it's the Allied player's turn. Always the French goes first. And we have units, airborne units, special rules. So this is an interesting game because it pits the 2 Allied players against one another, and it emphasizes on that lack of cooperation. You have a historical setup and free setup options. So this is just 6 pages of rules, and here we'll take a look at the counters. Here we see the British. We have British infantry and armored units. We have some markers for major victory, 2 column shifts, minor victory, and we have the, suppose that's the RAF unit. Here we see in medium blue the French forces. These are infantry corps, and you have some more here. You have the Armée d'Air, the French Air Force. Some more markers, a French Republic marker. These in dark blue are Belgian units. They're in dark blue. Here we have some more markers, French armored units, motorized infantry. You have some German corps there in gray. And there's 3 light green and 2 orange units. All those 5 units are Dutch units. I don't know why some are colored differently. And then finally, we have, in the bottom, we have the German forces, core strength, and you have the armored units. You have some parachute units, Luftwaffe. So these are the counters for Betrayal. Here we have a game turn track, and the game lasts up to 11 turns. So this is Betrayal, 2-player game. One player takes the British, Dutch, and Belgians, and the other the French. So it's an odd situation, but it was a pretty odd alliance. So I guess that's what the designer is after, to highlight how difficult cooperation was with both sides. Here we see the player aid, and here we see the combat results table, odds based. You have a 1.5 to 1 ratio there, which is not hard to figure out. Exchanges, attacker withdrawal. You have ASW, attacker, step reduction and then withdrawal, defender eliminated. There's surrender results there, defender surrenders. We have the explanation of the combat results, column shifts, die roll modifiers, And then there's an air bombardment table. We have a victory condition summary there. See, the British have to control 4 ports for a major victory. The Germans have to control 3 of 4, 3 ports, 3 port areas, and Paris. And at least 2 named South Map edge areas. So you have to push, if you're the Germans, to the coast. And minor victory conditions are also expressed there. We have a sequence of play, which is not too long. We saw already. And we have the air interception table. So these are the components for Betrayal by Roger Nord. And the next game is Strange Victory by Stephen Cunliffe. And I did a video of one of Stephen Cunliffe's games, a playthrough of the game about the Japanese attack on Wake Island. I really enjoyed it. It's a very innovative way of conducting a solitaire game with a lot of fog of war, a lot of inverted counters. And this game follows in those footsteps. You see that it's an area map, but you see that each area has a box with a letter. And at the beginning, you set up the units that have these letters in their front sides. You set them in these spaces. So you know it's a B unit, but you don't know what specific unit is going to show up there if you're the Germans. And in this game, you control the Germans. The AI controls the Allies. The Germans start from the areas here in the top right-hand corner of the map, and they have to push towards the Channel and Paris. In order to score victory points, you see that certain spaces are worth victory points, like Amiens, which is worth 2 victory points. And of course, you see in this side, Arras, also worth 2 victory points. You don't see Paris here because this game deals more with the push to the coast in order to isolate 1/3 of the Allied forces, including the British Expeditionary Force. So Paris doesn't appear here. This is the effort to cut the Allied forces and cause the evacuation that happened at Dunkirk. Now, in this game, Hitler has a particular influence. Instead of a game turn track, you have an OKW panic track that goes up to space 21. If that marker reaches that space, the game ends. And it's basically a turn. And what is each space is a turn, and what it reflects is Hitler giving the halt order to his panzers not to continue pushing towards the coast. So you have to make sure that you reach the coast, because in the coast you have the prizes here. You have all these victory points: Calais, Dunkirk, Boulogne, and this is where the juicy victory points are found in the game. We have also coastal defense boxes there, and here you see some boxes where you keep track of audacity points. The commanders of the panzer forces, namely Reinhardt, Guderian, and Rommel, have a fixed number of audacity points that can be used to obtain certain benefits in the game, to move a 3rd space instead of the customary 2 spaces that units can move. Also, I believe, to repair damage and other benefits. So you keep track of those here as you expend those points. As stated before, the French units, Allied units, start in these spaces inverted, that is showing the letter that corresponds to the box. And some of the units have an explosion together with the letter. Those are reaction units. These are kept off the map, and they're kept in these spaces until they appear during the counterattack phase, where the Allies attack German forces. Here you have a space for damage markers and campaign assets of the Germans. These are units that improve their forces. Let's take a look at the counters. Here you see the front of the Allied counters, and you see they are color-coded in the same way as you see the color coding in the map. So you see that green A here and here, and you have these green A counters, and some counters have the explosion. These are the units that are used in counterattack by the Allies, also known as the reaction units. When we flip the counters to their backside, you see that the units have different types and strengths. You have infantry, armor. These are British units. You have some recon units there for the Germans. And sometimes refugees can pop up, and that means that there's no counterattack by the Allies in spaces where there are refugees. So the Allies are hindering the refugees are hindering the Allied effort in that way. You have some no-move markers and additional markers here. These are the campaign assets. Let's take a look at the front sides of the assets. Here are the assets, and there's some die rolls associated to each one of them. We have the markers to keep track of the audacity of each one of the commanders for the Germans. So you see there's not a lot of German markers and units. And so basically you have to push before Hitler gives the halt. And you don't know what's in front of you until you flip the units. Now, the rules for this game, there's the rule book for Strange Victory. This is just 6 pages of rules. You have there the explanations for the counters. You have German units and assets. You have there the game turn structure, the blitz phase described. Then you have the counterattack phase where the Allied units counterattack. And you have the determination phase, which is like an administrative phase. And you also here advance the panic marker, which can give you the halt. And here you have the victory point schedule. Let's take a look at the player aid card. Player aid card has the game turn structure, the sequence of play here. You have a summary of combat results. They're pretty descriptive. Bloody firefight. And you have brutal breakthrough, devastating overrun, pitched battle. I like that because it gives flavor to the narrative of the game. And then on the right-hand side, you have the explanation for the at start asset counters. Basically, those with the dice symbol there add dice to panzer divisions. And see there the recon units, gas markers. These allow the panzers to continue the advance. Refugees, these hinder the Allied counterattacks. They cannot counterattack when one of these counters is in the same space. General Giraud gives a free reroll to the Germans. General Giraud, I think, surrendered early on. And then you have French infantry and armored unit effects there. Finally, you have the breakdown counter, and that reflects that the division was plagued by mechanical issues and cannot continue. So I guess that's not good for us. That's one of the reasons, I guess, Hitler wanted to halt the panzers. So these are the components for Strange Victory. Again, a solitaire game by Stephen Cunliffe. A lot of hidden information, counters which their strengths and identities are flipped to their back sides, and you control the Germans. Solitaire game, Stephen Cunliffe. Now to the 4th game in the package, the most substantial game, and you'll see why, The Seeds of Disaster by John Prados. And this game really intrigues me because it's a 2-player game, and it's about the campaign in the West, but it doesn't start in 1940. It starts in 1934. And you see that there's certain diplomatic statuses. You start in peace. In 1934, you move to opposition, military preparations, armed belligerents, and active hostilities. And while you're doing that, you're playing the game at different levels, at a diplomatic level, and you're also gathering intelligence on your enemies, you're conducting counter-espionage, and you're building your forces for the eventual war. And then when you play the peace, opposition, military preparation, diplomatic levels, you play yearly turns. And then when you switch to armed belligerence, the turns are monthly. And finally, active hostilities, which is the onset of the war between the sides. These are weekly turns. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and you have this kind of interaction between non-military aspects of the game early on, which are going to affect the order of battle and your capabilities during the conflict. So that's very interesting. Here you have a track for resource points, and here is the track where you collect or gather intelligence events. And here you determine if your die roll modifiers when you roll on the intelligence table. This game is substantial. It has a lot of play rates. This is the map, and you see the map has a fair number of boxes and tracks. German command points. There's also command points and intelligent points, and they're kept track in this area. Now you see the map has a large number of areas, small areas, but a lot of them. And it reminds me of these maps by Europa Universalis. You have here the Maginot Line, and there's many rivers to cross. You have forest spaces, Belgium. You have the coast here, Dunkirk, but also you have Paris, which is the prize there, and the victory spaces. Let's take a look at the rules. The rule book here is the most substantial. It has 12 pages of rules. This game is more complex, but it is, as I stated before, intriguing that you start the game so early on and you fight the war on so many levels. So you have the diplomatic statuses that we talked about, and there's event cards, and the cards come in sheets. I already punched them out and laminated them. These are the cards. These are the event cards, and the ones with numbers here are cards that you can use for counter-espionage. You can use the card for that purpose, or you can use it for the event. And here you have the events. This is not a card-driven game. I would say it's a card-enhanced game. But you have a fair number of cards. I believe you have a total of 24 cards. And so you have this element of the game that enhances replayability. You have also, as I stated, counter-espionage, which allows you to see what the other side has in terms of his capabilities. And you can reduce the intelligence level of the other side. Then you have intelligence points. It tells you how to accumulate these points. There's an intelligence points table, which I'm going to show you. And there's command points, which are used to move your forces, attack, and tells you how to accumulate command points, uses of command points. And because of the experiences that your forces obtain by engaging in combat, you get modifiers for future command points. Then you have mobilization. This is how the units finally get on the board in preparation for hostilities. There's resource points, mobilization cost chart. So you have a lot of different levels on which this game is played. Technology level. And you have rules for strategic redeployment. I believe armored units can be either columnar, that's a way they can be used, or poised Poise units have special advantages. Strategic redeployment. Here you have the combat sequence, and there's a mini battle that goes on before the mobile forces battle that influences the resolution of combat. So you have the procedures here, battle dice, rules for fortifications, and Maginot Line. And army disruption. You have to keep track of the strengths of each of the armies in this game. And you have also 2 player aid cards that come in cardstock. This is one for the allies. And you have each one of the armies here, and you keep track of the strengths, the tech level of your forces. Here you have for your air units and your general reserves. You have to build your reserves too. And that's the army display for the Allies, and this is the one for the Germans, and it is organized in a similar way. We have victory conditions, air fleet operations, parachute assaults, and we have the setup here. So this is a very intriguing game because I've never seen anything like that. Here's the full sequence of play, so you see it's a pretty involved game for 12 pages of rules. And then you have the player aid cards. There's 5 of them. This is number 4. The intelligence points table, resource points table, and intelligence qualitative indicators. These give you modifiers, I believe, to the roll on the intelligence table. Mobilization cost chart. You have the different units and the cost, I believe, to bring them on board. Uses of the counter-espionage card. This is what you can do with counter-espionage. And when you see the back, here we have the command events table, and this is, you have a lot of command events. You roll 2 dice, and one die is the tens digit, and the other one is the 1 to 6, and you locate the event here. They're very interesting. This gives a lot of flavor to the game. You have 36 combat event tables, and then you have here the intelligence events table. So events happen relating to intelligence, and it's kind of the same type of table with 36 possible results. And on the other side, you have a chronology which tells you how the game progresses, how you start, and which diplomatic status you start, and how many event cards are drawn per year. And sometimes you have to make some check dice rolls to see if the diplomatic status is raised to the next level close to hostilities begin. And then you have your terrain effects chart here, listing the effects on movement and combat of the different terrain types. And then we have the 5th player aid card, which has the uses of command points, command experience modifiers. These are modifiers that will increase or give you modifiers on the command table. Battle dice, how to resolve battles. And you have here the combat results, which depends on the difference of the battle dice result and what happens to the losers and the winners, retreats, advances after combat. So this is a game that I left for last on purpose because I haven't played any, but of the 4, this is the one that intrigues me the most because it offers so much richness of detail. Because when you think about the 1940 campaign, we all know it was a walkover for the Germans, but the Germans didn't even expect that. And it was a disaster for the French and for the Germans in a sense, because they thought then that they were invincible, and Hitler at least thought, and that Russia would be even an easier foe. But here you see more than just the military aspect. You see the coming of the disaster, the building of the disaster. But if you play this game, maybe the French, when they start the hostilities, they have a chance, depending on what you do. So this one is really intriguing for me. And this is the 4th game of this package. Now let's take a look at the 5th game. The 5th game is Behold, a Pale Glider. And this is the game about the German airborne assault, or air landing assault, I may say, against Ben Emael, the Belgian fortress. And you can see here the space is represented by these squares and lines that connect the squares. You have a turn record track, 6 turns, and this postcard game comes with the counters, cardboard counters, and you have the counters there in those 2 rows in the bottom. There's additional counters apparently for other games, other postcard games like Guns of the Ascari and Boudica. So you have some replacement counters, I suppose. So this is what's inside the box of the annual for 2015 for Against the Odds magazine. It's the 1940 campaign, but each game is very different. If you want a quick playing area impulse game, go for Springtime for Hitler. If you want to try a solitaire game with a lot of hidden information and surprises, Stephen Cunliffe's A Strange Victory may be in store for you. Play Betrayal if you want to try something which we never see in games, that is the French and the British fighting against each other during the campaign in France. And finally, if you want to explore the reasons why France fell in 1940, you have to go well before that year. And the game of Seeds of Disaster may have those explanations in store for you. So this is what's inside this package. I think chances are that you're going to like one of the games here, depending on what type of gamer you are. I am certainly intrigued by the one by John Prados, and the other ones look very interesting too in their own approach. Each game is different. So this is the annual for 2015, and this is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.